Some people believe that a high position in a corporation gives them the power to treat everyone around them like garbage. I learned exactly how dangerous that illusion can be when a 20-something executive decided to fire me from a job he did not even understand. He thought I was just a low-level tech support worker sitting at a table. He had no idea that I actually controlled the digital lifeblood of his entire operation. My name is Vivian, and I manage the critical tech infrastructure for the entire Apex Tower. I was studying the network blueprints for the upper floors when a sharp snapping sound echoed right next to my ear. A young man wearing an incredibly expensive designer vest was glaring down at me with pure contempt. This was Preston, the newly appointed director of operations whose father happened to own the parent company. Preston demanded that I immediately fix the wireless connection because his meeting was lagging. I calmly explained that I was not a member of the help desk and that I was currently reviewing the building lease agreements. My response only made his face turn a deep shade of red. He slammed his hand onto the table and screamed that he did not care about my excuses. The entire open office fell completely silent as Preston pointed a finger directly at the exit. He announced that I was useless and that I was officially fired from the building. I sat there in complete fascination because he genuinely believed he possessed the authority to terminate my employment. If you want to see how this absolute disaster unfolds and how entitled executives implode, please take a moment to subscribe and drop a like on this video. I quietly closed my laptop, packed my leather folder, and walked toward the elevator without saying a word. Preston thought he had just asserted his dominance over a random employee, but he had actually cut his own throat. I did not work for his firm because I owned the independent company that leased the advanced fiber lines and server cooling systems. By forcing me to leave, he legally terminated the active negotiation for their digital amenities. I decided to walk across the street to enjoy a nice hot espresso. Shortly after I left, the building manager named Arthur arrived on the 37th floor with a celebratory bottle of champagne. He was expecting to meet me so we could finalize the 10-year lease extension with the company. Instead, he found Preston celebrating his foolish victory with his colleagues. When Preston proudly bragged about firing the annoying tech woman, the face of Arthur drained of all color. Arthur explained to the room that I was not a vendor but the actual infrastructure landlord of the property. I controlled the fiber optic trunks, the backup generators, and the specialized climate systems for their massive server room. Without my signed agreement, their special corporate privileges were completely invalid. Preston began to pale as he opened the contract folder on the table and saw my name listed as the managing partner. Down in my main office behind the mechanical rooms, I logged into the core system administrator portal. I felt no anger because business is strictly about contracts and Preston had rejected mine. I began the process of reverting their premium services back to the basic building standards. First, I disabled their priority elevator access, which meant their staff would now face massive delays in the lobby every morning. Next, I revoked their digital tokens for the heavy freight elevator, ensuring their upcoming hardware deliveries would be completely stalled. The most critical adjustment involved the dedicated climate control loop that kept their data center from melting down. I reset the digital valves on the roof to the minimum legal requirements for standard office space. Within an hour, the temperature in their server room began to climb rapidly. My secure landline phone rang and it was the chief legal counsel for the property, a woman named Regina. She had received a panicked call from Arthur and wanted to know how bad the situation would get. I informed her that I was simply following the verbal termination issued by the tenant representative. Regina understood the liability rules perfectly and promised to draft the necessary paperwork to protect my corporation. By the middle of the afternoon, the laws of the office environment began to shatter for Preston. The automated privacy glass in the executive conference room failed and became completely transparent. The internal security scanners stopped recognizing biometric data, which forced the executive doors to pop open permanently. Then the critical system alerts started flooding my screen as their server temperatures reached dangerous levels. Preston sent me a frantic email demanding that I fix the air conditioning immediately without offering a single apology. I simply archived his message as evidence and prepared for my dinner meeting with a man named Julian. Julian was the chief executive of Vertex Solutions, the fiercest competitor of the firm owned by the father of Preston. They had been desperate for advanced network capacity for years. Over dinner at a premium steakhouse, I offered Julian the premium fiber allocation and the dedicated cooling loops that had just become available. He was an incredibly polite executive who treated me with absolute professional respect. Julian eagerly signed a 5-year contract worth over $1 million before our main course even arrived. I remotely rerouted the digital bandwidth to his floor right from my smartphone. On Friday morning, the corporate lawyer for the parent company called my office in a state of absolute terror. He explained that their satellite operations were collapsing and that they were bleeding vital data. I informed him that the premium capacity had already been legally sold to another client on a binding lease. He begged for an emergency meeting, but I told him I was unavailable until Monday morning. Over the weekend, their server room became a total sauna and their data packets slowed to a crawl. On Monday morning, the security keys for their employees failed to update because the network was completely offline. A massive crowd of frustrated workers trapped at the turnstiles greeted Preston when he arrived. He looked completely defeated and exhausted as I walked past him into the building. At 9 o'clock, I entered the meeting room where Preston and his father, Garrick, were waiting with their legal team. Garrick offered a tense apology for the actions of his son and asked to sign the original agreement. I revealed that the premium infrastructure was gone and that their business could no longer function in this location. Garrick looked at his son with pure fury as he realized the truth. The firm was forced to break their lease and move their entire operation to a remote warehouse in another state. Vertex Solutions moved into the vacant space and became our most profitable and respectful tenant. I learned that real power does not come from screaming or snapping fingers at people. True authority belongs to the individuals who quietly manage the foundations that keep the world running every single day.